This video is going to cover the conjugations and uses of ir in the present tense. So, you may or may not be familiar with the concept of an irregular verb at this point. You should, however, be pretty comfortable with the idea of regular verbs. Now, a regular verb is one that follows conjugation patterns. And we know that those are something like this. So for AR verbs, for instance, our conjugation patterns are based on subject pronouns and based on what the subject of a verb is, we know that it will have a specific sort of ending. So, for example, o, as, a, amos, ice, and an are examples of a conjugation pattern for a regular verb. However, there are some verbs, and you may have guessed by the fact that I wrote irregular verb over here, that don't follow these conjugation patterns. So these verbs don't follow normal patterns. And what this means is that, unfortunately, you will have to memorize the unique endings for those verbs. So, ir is one of the more irregular verbs in Spanish, and you probably could have guessed that something was up based on the fact that this verb by itself is the infinitive ending for IR verbs. So ir has its own set of wacky conjugations that don't follow the typical IR conjugations, o, es, e, imos, is, and en. These are not going to work for ir. Instead, we have some conjugations or verb forms that are totally sort of off the chart strange. And let's take a look at those. Okay, so we have our verb here. And before we move on, I'll tell you that the English translation of ir is to go. So anytime you want to say, I'm going to pool, or let's go to the restaurant, ir is the way to go. No pun intended. So these are the conjugations for ir. We'll start by looking at our subject pronouns as usual. We have yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, nosotras, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, and ellos, ellas, ustedes. Now, as I said, sort of the only remedy for an irregular verb is to memorize the conjugations. So here we go. Yo voy, tú vas, él, ella, usted va, nosotros, nosotras vamos, vosotros, vosotras vais, ellos, ellas, ustedes van. So you can see that there is sort of a pattern to these that looks sort of like an AR verb, except the V sort of came out of nowhere. So, what you're going to have to do is just memorize these, practice them over and over, and eventually they'll become second nature. So to do that, we'll go through a few examples and then let you try a few by yourself. Okay, so I've written our conjugations and our subject pronouns up here, and I'll just walk you through 2 or 3 examples, and then I'll let you try 2 or 3 examples, and then you'll just have to practice by yourself until the conjugations are really sort of ingrained in your memory. So example number 1, I'll just give you a subject. Our verb is ir. then it says a la playa, to the beach. So we're going to talk about where various people are going. So, first, as always, we're going to identify our subject. We have our subject here, and we know our verb is here. Subject and verb. Now, we're not working with a subject pronoun, so we should figure out what subject pronoun Marta would be so that we can choose the proper conjugation of ir. Well, Marta is singular, female, and we're talking about her, so we're in the third person. That means we choose ella. This means that our conjugation for ir will be va. So our sentence will look like this. Marta va a la playa, which translates to Marta goes to the beach. Alright, next example. We will have tú y yo, verb ir, and we will go to school. Alright, so first we identify our subject. Tú y yo is the subject of the verb ir. Now we choose a subject pronoun because even though these are technically subject pronouns, we want to consolidate them into one single subject pronoun. So, because it looks like we have 2 points of view going on, we look for first person first, and here we go. That means that we need the first person plural, which would be nosotros, nosotras. And I'm just going to default to nosotros, although it doesn't really matter in this case because the conjugation is the same. So, we need the nosotros conjugation of the verb ir, which we see up here is vamos. So we can write out our sentence. Tú y yo vamos a la escuela. You and I go to school. Okay, so here are your conjugations. I've left out some of the subject pronouns, so you'll just have to remember which group they fit into. And 3 sample sentences. You're just going to choose the proper conjugation of ir and write out the sentence correctly. In this last one, I've left the location open to you. So pause the video, work these out, and I will go through the answers starting now. So in our first sentence, we identify our subject as Elena y Susana. Our verb, as always in this video, is ir, so subject verb. And these 2 ladies are going al concierto, to the concert. So, which subject pronoun will be used to replace Elena y Susana? Well, it's plural, feminine, and it's in the third person. We're talking about them. This means we would use the subject pronoun ellas, and our conjugation would be van. So we have Elena y Susana van al concierto. Elena y Susana go to the concert. Alright, next sentence. Yo, verb ir a la fiesta. Subject, yo, already a subject pronoun, so we don't have to worry about that, and our verb is ir. So we just have to choose the right conjugation, which we see is voy. So yo voy a la fiesta. I go to the party. Alright, in our final sentence, we have tú, verb ir, and then blank location. So, again, we have our subject, and it's already a subject pronoun, and we have our verb, so we just need to choose the proper conjugation, which for tú is vas. So we have tú vas, you go, and I'll say a la piscina, to the pool. So, all that's left for you to do now is practice, review the conjugations, and get used to using them with people, with subject pronouns, any way you can, just so that they're sort of deeply fixed in your memory.